Hey everybody, today we are debating which is a greater national security threat to the United States, Islam or white nationalism, and we're starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for another epic debate. As today we are, as mentioned, debating which is a greater threat, white nationalism or Islam. And also, folks, want to let you know, if it's your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we've got a lot more debates coming up that we are excited about. As an example, you'll see on the bottom right of your screen, you will see that Vosh and Destiny will be meeting in person next month, and we'll be hosting that. So that's going to be a lot of fun as they hash out some issues. Also, though, want to let you know, folks, our guests, we're very thankful to have them, and I have linked them in the description. So if you're listening and you are enjoying what you hear, feel free. I have put those links down in the description box conveniently for you so that you can hear more from each of these gentlemen. So with that, we are going to get started quickly. Want to let you know that it's going to be like loose, kind of like 3 to 5 minutes from each side, followed by, in terms of giving their opening position or statement, followed by open conversation, and then our good old Q&A. So feel free, if you have a question, to shoot that question into the live chat. If you tag me with an @ModernDayDebate, it'll make it easier for me to not miss it. We'll ask those questions at the end, and you also have the chance, if you want, it's an option to do super chat, which will basically push your question to the top of the Q&A list, and it also allows you to make a comment towards one of the debaters that they, of course, will get a chance to respond to. As always, we ask that you be your regular friendly selves during the Q&A and those super chats. So thanks so much for being here, everybody, and thanks so much again, Hypocrite and Jangles, for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Pleasure.
Absolutely. So, which one of you would like to start on this wild topic today?
I could do my opener first. It might make more sense just because there's no real arguments in it. So there's nothing really to respond to.
You bet. The floor is all yours. Setting the timer. And ready for you. Thanks so much.
All right, for my opener, I just was going to explain how we got to this debate, which is that every year there is an ADL report that comes out about extremist violence in the United States. The last one that came out, which is still the 2018 one, as far as I know, generated a lot of media coverage because they made the claim that all extremist violence in 2018 was done by right-wingers. Now, the problem with the ADL report is that they use a really flawed methodology, but even worse than that, they don't even apply the methodology properly. So it's just a really bad report, and it's not something you would want to use if you wanted to get a sense of where the real extremist violence is coming from and what's happening in the United States. Now, I was tweeting that to somebody, explaining that I've gone through the ADL reports and found it bad, and James, is it James? Jangles?
Yep. Me?
James.
Justin.
James here.
Oh, yeah,
or is it Justin? I can't.
Sorry. No, I'm Justin. He's James. Sorry. I didn't interrupt. I'm sorry.
So, right. Sorry. So confused. Okay. So Justin quote tweeted me and kind of laughed at my claim that the ADL report was bad, which led to me asking if he wanted to do a debate about that. He asked me if instead I would want to debate whether or not white nationalism is a threat. Now, look, through all of modern history, every year there are terror attacks in America. There's right-wing terror attacks, left-wing terror attacks, and Islamic terror attacks. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like there's no right-wing threat of violence. That would be asinine and stupid. We know that this happens. So I declined to take that topic, but instead I said, hey, do you want to debate whether or not Islam is a bigger terror threat or violence threat in America? Security threat was technically the term I used. And he agreed to that, which is kind of shocking because it's on the same level of indefensibility. If you do a cursory examination of this topic with just a little bit of academic rigor and intellectual honesty, you're going to find that to try to claim that the right wingers are killing more people in America than the Muslims are, the radical Muslims, is crazy. It's indefensible. But he said yes out of what I can only assume is the typical leftist narcissistic hubris, thinking that they can reshape reality through sheer sophistry and rhetoric. But I have all the data here. I have all the experts on my side. It doesn't matter how you cut it up. The answer always comes out the same. So when I lay this all out, you're going to see that this is a black and white issue, as simple as asking yourself whether or not 20 is a bigger number than 10. And when we reach that point in the debate, Justin's going to have the option of doing some self-reflection and admitting that he was wrong on this and have to take the L, or he'll continue to double down in hypocrisy and denial. Now, I'd be happy to be proven wrong on this, but I predict that he is just going to continue with the denial. So when we get to that point in the debate, I just want you guys to remember that I predicted it here at the beginning.
Oh, they will remember because I have the ability to reshape reality.
That's we'll see about that.
It's a superpower.
That's all I had to say. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you very much for that opening. And now we'll switch it over to Jangle Science Lad, his opening as well. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. All right, so I actually wrote mine down, so it's going to be a lot less engaging, but hopefully it's true. On February 5th of this year, FBI Director Christopher Wray announced that the organization has elevated its assessment of the threat posed by racially motivated violent extremists, the majority of which are fueled by some type of white supremacy, placing them on the same footing as threats posed to the country by foreign terrorist organizations such as ISIS. According to the Department of Homeland Security, domestic terrorists have caused more deaths in the United States in recent years than have terrorists connected to foreign organizations, while a database compiled by the Investigative Fund at the Nation Institute has far-right plots and attacks outnumbering Islamist incidents by almost 2 to 1. Despite this, a Bren Center for Justice analysis of grants to counter violent extremism awarded by Trump's DHS found that 85% of those grants explicitly targeted minority groups. This gross imbalance in the way the U.S. confronts terrorism institutionally goes back decades, with the threat of white supremacy continuously ignored in favor of over-policing black and brown people. A 2009 report warning that economic dislocation and the election of a black president could fuel right-wing extremism faced fierce political backlash, and recognition that it may have led to training for local police departments to better identify and thwart the current rise in white nationalist violence was instead withdrawn. And in the age of the internet, the time between radicalization and mobilization to violence has been compressed. The DHS Strategic Framework for Countering Terrorism and Targeted Violence specifically calls out the spreading of ethnic replacement conspiracy theories on social media sites as a key driving force in several white supremacist attacks. We live in an age of online radicalization. A terrorist doesn't need to be recruited by an organization anymore. They can just spend too much time on Twitter, being convinced that the Jews are trying to breed out the white race because a Google search showed a black man with a white woman. But if an organization is trying to recruit within the U.S., which is far more likely to result in a successful attack than trying to get through 1,000 different barriers to travel here from abroad, which ideology has the larger pool of disaffected young people to choose from? White nationalism, which in this debate means the desire for white people to maintain social and political dominance in the United States, dwarfs the threat of radical Islam because, unlike the latter, the former is baked into our national consciousness. Put simply, white nationalism has roots and numbers, where Islam does not. One does not have to be a card-carrying member of the KKK to favor policies and opinions that further the goals of white nationalists. According to a book called White Identity Politics by Ashley Jardina, 30 to 40% of the white American population possesses a strong racial identity, and they are much more likely to be angry and fearful of the ongoing demographic changes our country is experiencing, as well as more likely to view politics as a zero-sum game, with strides made by minority groups coming at the expense of their own power and place in society. This fear is easily exploitable by politicians who can make racial appeals that not only take advantage of hostilities whites have towards racial minorities, but also their desire to protect and preserve their group's power. From George Wallace to Ronald Reagan to Pat Buchanan and now to Donald Trump, the threat of white nationalism is not limited to domestic terrorism, although it is a major threat there. The larger threat is to the ethos of a country whose mission of freedom and equality is thwarted by people who seek to maintain its historic racial hierarchy. And that's my time.
You bet. Thanks very much. We will now move into the open discussion section. Just want to let you know, by the way, folks, any topic, because I know this is probably our most controversial topic we've ever hosted. We are more than willing, if someone ever in the future wants to do like what's more dangerous, Christianity or white nationalism, or you name it, we are all about equality. We are willing to offend everyone equally. So please, it's okay. We really are willing to host any topic like that. So we're not trying to pick on any particular group. So with that, we are going to go into open discussion. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for being here. The floor is all yours.
Excellent. So since I just finished, do you want to kind of like respond to what I was saying?
Yeah, I mean, that was a bit of a gish galop, which I don't really know if there's a lot of value in throwing out 87 points when you can't really respond to them one by one. But let's just try. Let's start with the FBI thing. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that on February 5th, this is like a couple weeks ago, Christopher Wren, is that his name? The director of the FBI?
Yeah.
Ray, that's right. He upgraded the racially motivated violence to the same level as ISIS.
Right.
Now, do you think that the FBI is a good source for who we should be looking to what the terror threat is?
They certainly have their problems in the past, but the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI both are elevating white supremacy and white nationalism, like basically extreme right-wing organizations on par with organizations like ISIS. And if anything, there's a history of them downplaying that white supremacist threat in the past. So kind of, yeah. I mean, when we're talking about national security, I kind of, for all their faults, I do kind of default to our national security organizations to, explain who is the threat despite their problems. I don't know who else you would look for.
I mean, I feel similarly about it because who else would you look to do the proper assessment of the threat, right? Who would be better than the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security?
I feel you have an answer, right?
No, I can't think of anybody who would be better than those organizations. But the reason I wanted to ask first is because, so first of all, Christopher Wray in July of 2019 said that homegrown terrorism is the #1 threat to national security, which is, of course, jihadi terrorism.
Whoa. What? Huh? Say that again. I'm sorry.
Are you not aware of this one?
No, say that again.
Yeah, so in July of 2019, they did the same thing that they did in February, which is a congressional hearing of the FBI. And the same guy, Christopher Wray, said that, actually, I wrote down the quote here. Let me put it in his exact words. I think the greatest terrorist threat to the homeland is homegrown violent extremists, which is jihadi-inspired violence.
One second, right here.
Pretty much debate.
Sorry, my mic was echoing. I had to switch out. Hopefully that fixed things. Hopefully.
Sounds clear to me.
Okay. Anyway. So yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that he said that. But he also said, but then again, a couple months later, he still put it on the same level. He put white nationalism and radical Islam on the same level. And I also am really curious to know, can you give me the link to that? Because I want to know if he was talking specifically about, what was he referencing there?
I have the audio I can play for you guys if you want. Would that work? We can just listen to it in his own words. It's about a 2-minute clip.
You sure you don't have a transcript of it or something?
Well, I only transcribed that part. It's a YouTube video, so
it's not like recorded anywhere?
Well, no, of course it is. But the reporting, it's hilarious. The reporting, he in that same hearing, he said that the majority of domestic arrests were some form of white supremacy. Maybe you saw that part. So the reporting was all, oh, he said that the majority of domestic terror arrests are falling under some category of white supremacy, and all the media ran with that. And it's not even that they buried the part about homegrown terrorists being the biggest threat, but they just omitted it from a lot of the reporting.
I've read a lot of these reports, and they do definitely talk about jihadist extremism as being a threat. But so for example, I'm reading the Department of Homeland Security Strategic Framework for Countering Terrorism and Targeted Violence. And in this report, they do talk about jihadi extremism, but almost all of it is overseas. That's where the real threat of Islamic extremism is to the United States. It's not here. And when they talk about homegrown terrorism.
I'm sorry, you're totally confused about what's going on here. So let me explain the categories that the FBI uses, and I have like sound clips to play for you if you really don't believe me on this.
I'd really rather have transcripts and I have PDFs of actual reports in front of me.
It's congressional hearings. I didn't have time to transcribe the 4-hour congressional hearing.
All right.
I watched it and I clipped the audio of the relevant parts. I can give you the links, but that's all I can do.
Okay.
So you have international terrorism. This is Islamism from groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, maybe the Taliban and others. Then you have homegrown terrorism. This is Americans living in America who are radicalized by Islamic propaganda and do Islamic terror attacks in America.
I mean, if that's how you define the homegrown terrorism.
That is how the FBI defines homegrown terrorism.
Okay, if you define terrorism to be exclusively jihadist, of course you're going to have that meaning. You just need the definition. Okay, send me the definition one more time.
Homegrown terrorism is exclusively jihadist. I'm starting to understand why you took this debate, because you just don't understand the terms that we're talking about.
If the term is homegrown terrorism is exclusively jihadist, I do not understand what point you think you're trying to make here.
So I'm going to finish giving you the categories, then I'm going to play the clip, okay? So homegrown terrorism is exclusively jihadis who are in America radicalized by Islamic extremism. Then you have domestic terrorism, which is a separate category.
Sure.
This is, right, so this under domestic terrorism is where you find basically all of the non-Islamic forms of terrorism, whether it's left-wing or right-wing. This is how the FBI does it. So within that umbrella of domestic terrorism, there is a category called racially motivated violence.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yeah, inside of the category of racially motivated violence is where you're going to find
white supremacist extremism. Yeah,
and you're back again to the extremists itself.
Yeah, I have that exact report you're talking about in front of me.
Okay, so here's how the FBI ranks it. Homegrown terrorists are at the top. They're the #1 threat. Then you have the domestic terrorists and the international terrorists, which are on the same threat. You said earlier that the real threat is like ISIS, and that they've actually been lowered, and the white supremacists.
I didn't say the real threat was ISIS.
Well, you said international. You said that's where the threat to the United States come from.
It is,
internationally, but.
So I'm saying when we talk about Islamic extremism and jihadism, the vast majority of the threat is overseas. It's not here. It's not here.
You're wrong.
You're wrong. I'm very wrong.
Okay, so this is how it's ranked. At the top, you have homegrown terrorists. Then you have on the same level below that domestic terrorism and international terrorism. Inside of the domestic terrorism, you have the racially motivated, and then a portion of those are like the white nationalists. So the homegrown jihadis are way up here, and the white nationalists are down here, according to.
Why do the stats not match that? Why do they don't? If you look at the violence by any report, not just by the ADL, which you just have kind of dismissed without telling us why. Oh, I mean, you did tell us why, but it was a really weak defense as to why the ADL report shouldn't be listened to. They also measure Islamic extremism as well. The number of attacks and are far outweigh from right-wing extremists, especially white supremacists. They've outranked. They've been far more numerous than radical Islamic attacks. And again, it's not the threat level is not just violence and terrorism. It's also I'm sure you would agree that part of the threat of a radical Islamic terrorist is the support they get from their community.
And that's where they're going to take a lot of root. That's where they're going to get a lot of support that like fuels their terrorism. That kind of support in the United States is not there for jihadis like it is for white nationalists.
So, no, first of all, you're wrong. Second of all, I'm worried about violence. I'm worried about innocent people getting killed. I don't know what kind of vague, I don't know why I'm supposed to be scared of support. I'm worried about innocent people getting killed. That's what I'm worried about. What are you worried about exactly?
I'm worried about innocent people getting killed. Of course I am. But also,
good. So that's what we're talking about. Second of all, as far as the actual numbers are concerned, the best terror database that I found, the one who categorizes them correctly, is a website called johnstonearchive.net. And this guy, have you seen this one?
I'm really curious as to why you know that's the best.
Because I've looked at them all,
and they agree with you.
Well, no, because they categorize them the most accurately.
Shoot me the link on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about this.
Just to give you the numbers, I went through starting from 2014 to present, and I counted the number of Islamic terror attacks, right-wing terror attacks, and left-wing terror attacks. Here's what the results were. So for right-wing terror attacks, there was 9 attacks on American soil from January 1st, 2014 to present. They resulted in 56 people killed and 64 injured. In that same time period, there was 20 Islamic terror attacks, which resulted in 105 people killed and 182 injured. And I also did left-wing, even though it's off topic, but I thought people would be interested. In that same time, there was 7 left-wing terror attacks, which resulted in 19 people killed and 25 injured. So the numbers do actually bear it out. Now, before we go into talking about the attacks and arguing over the numbers, I think it's really important that we hash out that the FBI considers, according to their own words, homegrown violent extremists to be the greatest threat, which is jihadi violence, because you agreed that they were in the best position to do the threat assessment.
Yeah, and their more recent statement was that their most recent statement was that the white supremacist violence and like far-right attacks are on par with ISIS, are on par with that.
Right.
That's the most recent statement, a few weeks ago.
Right. ISIS is, first of all, a different category than homegrown extremists.
Like 7 out of the 8 radical jihadist attacks in the past couple of years have been inspired by ISIS. So I'm pretty sure that
they're homegrown extremists. An ISIS attack would have to be like an actual 9/11 style event or something like that. So the propaganda comes from organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, of course.
But the people who carry out the attacks are homegrown extremists for the most part.
Yes.
But just to be clear, so you're on board with the definition of homegrown extremism, right? I don't have to play that clip for you.
I've mostly been focused on the Department of Homeland Security and their definitions. But I guess I'm on board with that. But also, these are just definitions. We're talking about which one is the greatest security threat to the United States. And I just do not see it.
I'll just read the quote one more time. I think the greatest terrorist threat to the homeland is homegrown violent extremists, which is jihadi-inspired violence. That's from 7 months ago. That's not an ancient quote.
No, but a much more recent one is not that. Anyway,
but I keep explaining what the more recent one means to you, and you don't seem to understand that it doesn't refute this. It doesn't overwrite this, because it's 2 different things. Now, I have some numbers here to give you a little.
Please give me numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is again from the FBI reports. So in the July hearing, the same one where he said that the biggest threat is international terrorism, he asserted that a majority of domestic terrorism cases we've investigated are motivated by some version of what you might call white supremacist violence. That was the big headline that the media ran with. What he meant was that the majority of so he actually misspoke when he said that, and he corrected himself in a Washington Post article. I have the link to the Washington Post article. What he meant to say was that the majority of racially motivated extremists killings were white supremacists. So not domestic total, but just that one subcategory of racially motivated. Now I have some more numbers to put that into context for you, which is that in 2019, he said that there was 850 active domestic terrorism investigations from the FBI. Okay, 850 active domestic terrorism investigations, 40% of which are racially motivated. So let's say for the sake of argument that 80% of the racially motivated attacks are white supremacist. That's probably a high estimate. Like, that's a very generous estimate if you look at the hate crime stats and you also look at the fact that the FBI categorized Black identity extremists as a higher threat in a 2019 report.
Yeah, I did see that. That was very dumb. That's Trump's doing right there.
Well, maybe they know something we don't. So the FBI...
Okay, one, that was a leaked report. This is not something that they released to the public. And two, all of the racially motivated instances they use to cite why these things are occurring and why the threat levels are the way they are, all of the things they cite were white supremacist fights.
Yeah, but look, there's lots of examples of Black identity extremists killing people in the last 5 years.
And there's more of white supremacists. It's a much more salient threat.
Maybe if you go by death toll, because there's been a couple big ones, but I don't think by actual number of attacks. Anyway, that's a side issue. The point I'm trying to make is let's say 80% of the racially motivated violence is white supremacy. I'm just guessing that number. I'm pulling it out of my ass, but I feel like it's a very generous estimate. That would be 272 active investigations by the FBI. Okay. Now this is in the February hearing. Mm-hmm. The one from 2 weeks ago, he said that there are over 1,000 active investigations into homegrown terrorists right now.
Yeah.
So that's 4 times as many jihadis being actively investigated.
Wait, are you assuming that the rest of them are all jihadis?
No. Homegrown means jihadi.
Okay.
We established that. I can play the clip for you. I think we should listen to the clip. I think it would be good for everyone. It's only 2 minutes.
All right. You know, some of that reason is because they are vastly more over-policed than white people. More than 80% of all of the funding, the grants, especially that the Trump administration has given, and since 9/11, almost all of the grants given are policing communities of color, are going into Muslim communities and policing them. So of course they're going to catch more potential terrorists, and they're going to miss a lot of white potential terrorists because that's not where the funding goes.
This is the same kind of thinking you can rewrite reality with rhetoric.
I just gave you a stat.
No, but listen, here's the problem. I just gave you the terrorist attacks and how there's more Islamist attacks and more Islamist deaths. So
that's not true, though. That's a lie. Whoa. That's a lie. Oh, stop right there. You just lied to me. Okay, the Department of Homeland Security, since 2014, let me get my notes out here. Let's see. Since 2014, there have been 8 lethal attacks from radical Islamic terror. 8.
Since 2014?
Since 2014, claiming 83 lives.
Give me the link.
This is the DHS Strategic Framework for Countering Terrorism. Let me see if I can find it. Shit, where is it? Come on. I will find
the actual incidents?
They say that there's more. They released a long report.
They say that there's more.
Now, is the Department of Homeland Security going to lie? Especially are they going to lie to make the are they going to lie in favor of Islamic extremism? What the hell is it? Why can't I find it?
Well, no, I'm not saying they're going to lie, but they might be using a much stricter definition. They might be using ones where it's met the legal threshold, right? Which whatever other thing you referenced earlier is not going to be using a strict definition like that, right? Did they say how many white nationalists there were in the same time period?
They said it was one of the most voted forms.
Whoa, that's really vague, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are we supposed to do with that?
8 lethal attacks in the U.S. since 2014. Is that a huge security threat to you?
Both of these are...
Answer that question. This is why specifically there's been 8, and there's been more deaths caused from domestic terrorism. Most of which were white supremacists. The vast majority of which were white supremacists, according to the Department of Homeland Security.
You're aware
in
that
in the
like
future.
Dude, you're wrong. You're just wrong. This is what I mean, denying reality.
I'm literally quoting a DHS report.
Right? Do they tell me they at least classified the Orlando killing as a terrorist attack?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Because that's more than like the two biggest white nationalist ones. Then you got San Bernardino.
Wait. Is the size or the number of the attacks? Because you're conflating those a lot depending on which one suits your narrative better. Does the size of an attack tell us more about the prevalence of an ideology, or is
and it's also the thwarted attacks. Let's talk about the New Mexico compound where they found like a military-style compound where 5 Muslims were training children to be school shooters.
Sweet. Let's go instance by instance, and let's see who can name more instances. I have a list of white supremacist violence from 2018 and 2019 in front of you. You want to go individual instance by individual instance and pretend that...
You picked the last 2 years only. How convenient.
How convenient? Yeah, because the whole point, I got these individual instances because I want broad data. Because we can list individual instances.
From only 2 years, huh?
I could have gone longer. Whoa! I could have gone longer. I specifically didn't. Yeah, I didn't because they don't matter. They don't matter. Individual.
2014.
And so did I. And there's been 8.
You think 2 years is a good sample size for?
No, I'm not. The entire purpose of getting these individual stories is they don't tell us much. We need to get broad data. And what I'm going through is the Department of Homeland Security is my main source here. There's also another source. Let's see. A worldwide threat assessment of the U.S. intelligence community. So this one also says that white supremacist violence is on the rise. And specifically, let's see. How about this my notes? Where is it? Why am I so bad at finding things in my notes?
Dude, you haven't provided anything substantial.
There we go. The worldwide threat. The worldwide. Hold on. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Well, first, you're just telling me what they said, and you have a clip. I will listen to that clip later. Put it in the chat if you really want to.
Let's listen to it right now.
Right,
this is from February. The clip is from 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Not play it, sure. I'm not denying anything.
All right, let's listen to this.
Violent homegrown extremists, and I know that's another major challenge for the FBI. What can you tell me about how you're doing, what you're doing to better address that challenge?
So we use the term homegrown violent extremists to refer to people already here in the United States, largely radicalized online by different parts of the global jihadist movement. And so these are people who are largely lone actors who will go from radicalization to mobilization and attack, sometimes weeks or days. And they'll choose as a method of attack something that's crude and readily available, a knife, a gun, car, and they'll choose to attack so-called soft targets, which is just intelligence community speak for everyday people living their everyday lives, as opposed to like a government facility. So that's a restaurant, a mall, a school.
Nightclub.
A nightclub, right, exactly, which means everything's a target. And so the challenge for law enforcement, federal, state, and local, is how are we going to act? The time, as the professionals say, between flash to bang is compressed, and the amount of information from law enforcement for that kind of attack is very, very, very limited. So it's a real challenge. It's different from the sort of sleeper cells of the immediate post 9/11 era. We have about 1,000, probably over 1,000, homegrown violent extremist investigations as I sit here today testifying before this committee, and it's in all 50 states and in all 56 of our field offices. So this threat is real, it's now, and it affects communities big and small.
Right, so that's 1,000 investigations compared to like 250 ones into white supremacy, give or take.
Well, I need to know more about those investigations. One, because a lot of them might not turn up anything. And again, they're getting a lot more funding going towards those investigations. Like the Trump administration is targeting that towards those communities.
Talking to somebody like you, he also said flat out that
part of my research. Hold on. No, hold on.
Is the
Part of my
Why
research.
do I bother talking to people who just like reject anything?
I did not reject anything. Part of my research was going into why the FBI and other law enforcement agencies have just now started to identify white supremacy as a serious domestic threat in the United States. They have ignored this threat for the longest time. FBI whistleblowers, former administration officials, all of them have said that they have had this information for the longest time, and just now, in February, they finally acknowledged that this is a problem worth putting on par with terrorist organizations like ISIS. There's a long history of ignoring white supremacist violence and instead over-policing minority communities because that's where the perceived threat really lies. That's what the public fear is, in the other, in people who are not white. White supremacists aren't scaring white people. They're not scaring the majority of the population like brown people, like other people are. That's where most of the fear comes from, and that's where most of the funding for that investigation, for those investigations come from. And you can ignore the fact that in the past few years, right-wing extremists have killed more people than Islamic extremists. That is an objective fact coming to us from the people that we trust. And if I go back to this report on, let's see, worldwide threat assessment of the U.S. intelligence community. All right, we're talking about domestic threats here because foreign threats are basically almost negligible coming in here. The barriers put in place for a foreign terrorist to get into the United States and cause like a terrorist attack is almost negligible. The risk comes from in here. And according to this community, the United States' well-integrated Muslim population, fragmented, homegrown, violent extremist population, and high level of vigilance will ensure that the United States remains a generally inhospitable operating environment for HVEs, homegrown violent extremists, compared to many other Western countries. The frequency of attacks will most likely be very low compared to most forms of criminal violence in the U.S., as long as USCT and law enforcement efforts remain consistent. So they're putting that threat is pretty low.
Yeah, you're comparing Islamic terror to crime, to like violent crime. That has nothing to do with white supremacist terror, man.
No, they just said that the U.S. Muslim population is very well integrated. The U.S. Muslim population is actually more progressive than the evangelical population. There's a lot of stats. So Pew Research says that they're more likely to condemn violence.
This shit. We're here talking about people getting killed in terror attacks, and you want to tell me about like views on homosexuality or whatever?
What was your debate topic that you proposed to me that I did all my prep for? I want you to tell me what you said you wanted to discuss.
What is a bigger security
wait. So sorry, guys. Wait. Forgive me. I just forgive me for interrupting. Jangles Science. Someone just said that it was a little bit harder to hear you. If you're able to just turn your gain up just a bit. There's not much I can do on my side.
All right, is that a little better?
Yes, thank you so much. Pardon my interruption. Thanks, guys.
So I've been giving you the benefit of the doubt for the longest time. I want you to tell me the topic that you proposed to me a couple of weeks ago when you said we wanted to discuss this.
What is the biggest security threat to the United States?
Go on.
Islamism or white nationalism?
Yeah, Islam or white nationalism. If we're talking about Islam,
if you want to talk about Islamism.
No, you said Islam.
No, we're talking about security threats. So I don't know why you're bringing up like who's more progressive, the Muslims or the evangelicals? Like, it's so weak, man. It has nothing to do with
because your topic was Islam. The topic was Islam versus white nationalism. That's the topic you proposed to me. The topic was Islam. Go back to okay, I can post screenshots of this. Go back to our like what you went over. You said white nationalism versus Islam. You did. So I did a lot of research on like the opinions of the Muslim community, and the Muslim community in the United States is very well integrated. They are not a threat to the United States. White nationalism, on the other hand, is also very well integrated into the American history. Like it's baked into our ethos. I told you that 30 to 40% of Americans have a strong white racial identity. So they have roots that Islam just doesn't have in America. They can gain public support. Threats are not just violence committed by terrorists. There are also policies put in place that can disparage.
That's not what a security threat is, you fucking retard. I'm sorry, but that's totally wrong. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about policies being put. We're talking about security threats. The democratic process is not a security threat. Jesus Christ.
In Charlottesville, how big was that rally?
Yeah, that is a security threat. That's not a.
Have you seen anything close to that from Islam in the United States ever? In the history of our biggest history, have you ever seen a rally like that?
Have you ever heard of 9/11? You ever heard of a little event called 9/11?
Yeah, a foreign terrorist organization came in here.
Boy, that was was kind of stupid, wasn't it, what you just said?
You're trying so hard to own me, man. You're not here for a real conversation.
I'm so frustrated because you just ignore anything that doesn't everything that proves you wrong. The FBI saying just point blank that homegrown extremists are the biggest. The number of
that clip you said didn't say that. I don't know if you misheard. That clip you said did not say that. It didn't say that they were a bigger threat than white supremacists. Nowhere in that clip said that.
That's the other clip. That's the other clip, dude. Let me play it for you. I'll play it for you right now. Hold on one sec. I've already read you the quote like 4 times, but I'm going to play you the clip now because you're in utter denial about this. So I have to read.
I'm not in denial about anything, dude.
Yes, you are.
What am I in denial of?
So while this is opening, let me propose something to you that this will really prove that you don't put your money where your mouth is. You claim that the reason that there's more investigations into Islamism is because of the funding, right?
Yes.
But now we know, as of February, it's before that, but as of the congressional hearing in February, we know that white supremacy is put on the same footing, right?
Yes.
The same amount of money is getting put into it. So what if we say...
No, same amount of funding? That is not what that said. That is not what that said.
Hold on. Threat level from the FBI, same amount of attention from the FBI, right?
No, they just put it on the same level. That doesn't mean they have the same amount of attention on it. They just said that it's as great a threat as ISIS. That has nothing to do with funding or investigations.
So, well, I mean, I don't know. I can't respond to that because I don't have proof of like where they put their funding or what.
Brennan Center for Justice. I can give you this link for you, okay? I can give you this link.
I don't want it. I'm gonna play this clip for you.
You don't want the link saying that, like, okay? I'm trying to do what you asked me to put my money where my mouth is.
Between the years 2000 and 2016, the white supremacists were responsible for more homicides than any other domestic extremism movement. Now, I see the distinction you're making, homegrown versus domestic. But let me ask you, can you quantify either one of them for us?
Well, in terms of number of arrests, we have, through the third quarter of this fiscal year, had about, give or take, 100 arrests in the international terrorism side, which includes the homegrown violent extremism.
This year.
But we've also had just about the same number, again, don't quote me to the exact digit, on the domestic terrorism side. And I will say that a majority of the domestic terrorism cases that we've investigated are motivated by some version of what you might call white supremacist violence, but it includes other things as well. I think the greatest terrorist threat to the homeland is the homegrown violent extremists. I will say that we take domestic,
foreign-inspired,
which is jihadist-inspired violence. That does not mean, by any stretch of the imagination, that we don't take domestic terrorism, including hate crime committed on behalf of some kind of white supremacist ideology, extremely seriously.
Cool, I don't disagree with that. Well, I don't deny that whatsoever, but that's still... No, it's not. Whoa! Because one guy said that he had an opinion, in his opinion, that he thinks jihadism is like more of a threat than white nationalism.
The director of the FBI.
Yeah, and then again, later he elevated it back up.
So we're supposed to value your opinion more than the director of the FBI.
How many times do I have to give his opinion of you again? Like, he still thinks that white supremacy is as a big threat as ISIS. That's what he said months later. That's what he said months later.
Homegrown, you're still confused? You don't understand that homegrown and ISIS is not the same thing? That there's international, there's homegrown, and there's domestic? Okay,
homegrown extremists, one of the things about homegrown extremists is they're inspired by ISIS.
Yes, but they're not categorized the same way in terms of threat level. So when they say the threat level from ISIS, they mean actual ISIS members in Syria or wherever.
Of course, they can inspire homegrown violent extremists. I agree with you. And that's a different definition than domestic extremism. Of course, I agree with you.
I got an Amazon delivery. Hold on a second.
This happened last time, too.
Diesel. Well, no problemo. Folks, if you have questions, feel free to fire them into the old live chat. Very excited. We'll be moving into the Q&A shortly. Maybe, he's got maybe about 25 minutes. So thanks for your questions, folks. I've gotten a good number of them already, and stoked to see that people are enjoying this so much today. And kicking it back to you guys.
Okay, so in addition to him saying that the #1 threat is homegrown violent extremists, we have the number of investigations, which is over 1,000 for the violent extremists.
Which we know is because they have more funding, because that's where targeted is. Even though that right-wing extremism has almost a 2-to-1 death ratio. The number of far-right plots and attacks outnumbered Islam's incidents by almost 2-to-1. The Trump administration has devoted over 80% of their funding towards investigating minorities.
You haven't sent me that link with your cooked-up numbers.
My cooked-up numbers? It's from the Brennan Center for Justice. I'm having trouble, organizing. Brennan Center for Justice.
Right, so again, you claimed you were using Department of Homeland Security, but it's some think tank that's not using the same.
I'm using it for that one. For that one statistic, the 82%. That's where that came from.
I'm sure it's bullshit. I'll go. Send me the link, and I'll go.
Look at what I just gave you a stat. I'm believing what you say with all this stuff. All right. I just gave you a stat, and they you can investigate this for yourself, but you're just gonna call it bullshit because you don't like it, and you're gonna accuse me of rewriting reality. Dude, that's not how it works. Let me ask you something. Here in the future, demographic change in this country is going to happen, all right? There's a very high likelihood that we will become a minority white country in the next 50 years. That has a lot of white people with nascent white nationalist tendencies scared out of their minds. That's one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected, because of white identity. According to that book that I read you, White Identity Politics, white identity predicted support for Donald Trump.
40%. I know, I heard you.
Yeah,
Listen,
they predicted. In the future, do you think going in the future, this white supremacist movement, this white nationalist movement, the alt-right, is going to grow and gain more support unless we put a stop to it? Unless we put a stop to people spreading racist propaganda, because it's really easy. Online is where these people are radicalized. The Department of Homeland Security specifically named sites like 8chan and 4chan. And going forward in the future, one of the things they said over and over in this DHS report is that the threat nature is evolving. That the threat is growing.
Statistical nonsense. I don't care. I only care about the numbers, man.
Yeah, they said the threat is evolving. The numbers are going to change in the future. They're trying to predict what's going to happen, and what they predict is an increase in white supremacist violence because of the changing ethnic makeup in this country and because of a lot of racist white people's opposition to it.
Let me give you a policy question.
You're not going to respond to any of that?
No, it's a waste of time.
A waste of time? It's a waste of time to address that argument? I'm not going to let you walk away from that. I want you to address that argument. In the future, do you think that with the rise of the alt-rights and the changing demographics that they are going to use to fuel their white nationalist fear-mongering, which you think is going to be a bigger threat going forward, which is what we should be focusing on?
I'm in favor of focusing on all violent extremists.
Which one would you put most of your jail? Yeah, which would you put most of your time in?
History shows that Islam is the biggest threat. Islam is currently the biggest threat. There's no reason to believe that white nationalism is on course to outpace Islam at any.
What's the Muslim population in the United States? I want you to tell me that.
Oh, so now we're going to talk about the per capita.
No, we're not actually. No, the exact opposite. No, the exact opposite. Dude, I would not laugh right now because you're about to look really fucking stupid. What is the Muslim population in the United States?
You got to answer my policy question first. You got to answer my policy question first.
What is the population of Muslims in the United States?
You don't get to filibuster. You don't get to just bloviate the whole time. I'm
asking you a question.
I've been trying to field my question.
You're going to answer this as soon as I'm done. What is it now?
Sure. Would you be in favor or opposed to a policy which said that avowed white nationalists should not be allowed to immigrate to the United States?
Avowed white nationalists should not be allowed to immigrate to the United States? If they express opinions like that, I'm not sure. I don't have a good opinion on that. I haven't researched. I haven't thought through foreign immigration policy. I've been mostly focused on domestic.
Massive threat. I thought they're a big threat.
Because I also want to preserve freedom of speech. Because I actually do care about the principles this country was built on, and I want to be able to I want you to be able to express opinions.
Dodge. Everybody saw the dodge.
They saw me presenting my you wanted a yes or no answer, and I gave you something more nuanced. It wasn't a dodge. Unless you're too stupid.
No, is not nuanced.
Because I'd have to think about it. Like, it would have to be, I'd need a lot more information. Is this person, like, do they have a history of violence? What's the likelihood they can advise? Or do they just express views?
They identify as white nationalists.
Nah. All right.
That's all you know.
All right. All right. Would I treat that person and a jihadist person who just expresses those views the same? Yes, I would. That's what you were going with that question. Because I preserve freedom of speech more so than anything else.
I wasn't talking about jihadi. I was talking about people trying to immigrate to the country.
Yeah, and if we're talking about like white nationalists, if I would let someone with an avowed white nationalist immigrate to the country versus an avowed jihadist immigrate to the country.
Hold. I'm not asking about jihadists.
I'm trying to compare the two because that's obviously what you're trying to get at. I'm saying that I want to preserve freedom of speech in this country, and I don't have a perfect set in stone answer for that. I'm not dodging anything. I'm trying to answer to the best of my ability, unless you are just too stupid to understand a yes or no answer. Was that your question?
How can I be too stupid to understand a yes or no answer when you're not giving me a yes or no answer?
You're right, I phrased that poorly. You got me! I phrased that poorly. You're too stupid to understand anything other than a yes or no answer. That's what I meant to say. I guess that's a little bit ironic that I called you stupid and then phrased something poorly. You got me there. Now answer my question. What's the population of Muslims in the United States?
Around 3 million.
Around 3 million, about roughly 1%. Okay, what's the population of white people in the United States?
I think around like 68-ish%.
68-ish%. Yeah, you're right. So, that equates to about roughly 200 million. So, if we make the argument that every single Muslim is an extremist worthy of danger, if 2% of white people have that same sort of extreme view about white nationalism, that outnumbers the Muslim population. So the per capita argument is not the one I was trying to make. I'm talking about sheer numbers. White nationalism is baked into our national identity. The risk of radicalization for white nationalists in the United States is far, far higher than it is for Muslims.
How there's so much Islamic terrorism in the United States.
8 attacks since 2014. 8 attacks since 2014.
I'm sorry, but I have to read you something now. Starting from 2014.
Hold on. The FBI also the FBI also counts like hate crime statistics. Like, that's also a form of white supremacist violence. It's not terrorism, it's targeted violence, but it's still something that's worthy of, like, they're also, like, less likely to, if a white person engages in white supremacist violence, that's not just terrorism.
I have all of the attacks since 2014 written down right here.
Sure, what were the attacks?
Okay. On September 24th, 2014, somebody beheaded a woman and stabbed another woman at the Vaughn.
Just give me the numbers. How many attacks are there?
20. I already gave you that.
Okay, 20 attacks since 2014. Yeah, that's bad. Obviously, we want to stop that. There's been more attacks. There have been more attacks, a 2-to-1 ratio, since like 2008.
No. For right-wing terror attacks since 2014, there's only been 9 attacks. And that's including like a couple libertarian sovereign citizens.
Where are you getting your information from?
JohnStoneArchive.net.
I don't think... I really question that source. I don't trust your ability to read data based on our last discussion. Is it from Is it from 40 years ago?
I've looked through everything on this list, and he classifies them properly.
He classifies them properly based on like what you want them to be. I don't trust your opinion. I don't trust your ability to give me that.
Based on what the evidence shows.
I want something like that's peer-reviewed or from like a reputable organization, not some random website you found on the internet.
Oh, what, like the Brain fucking Trust for Justice or whatever?
Brain Center for Justice.
Yeah, that's reputable, right? But this guy who's got like 3
A's. An actual institution, there might be problems with it. I haven't done extensive research on whether or not they make mistakes. But it's more reputable than a random website that you found that gives you the numbers that you want to see.
Give me the link to what they're, and I'll just skim through it and find shit that they've misclassified to push an anti-right-wing narrative.
Very honest of you. What happens if there's a narrative against Islam in this country? And they're just trying to push a narrative on you and you've been duped by it.
So what, are you saying the media is lying about what happens in the reports and that the FBI and the police are lying in their investigations?
Well, I don't know. Apparently we can just like classify things we don't like and it's like a conspiracy theory. Push a narrative.
Here's a question for you, because like, there was like another terror database I looked through where they classify Stephen Paddock as a right-wing terrorist.
The Las Vegas shooter? Yeah. I also read that Sebastian Gorka article.
I'm not following what you mean.
All right, so we are more likely to we're way more likely to classify terrorism if it's performed by a brown person. All right, we're less likely to classify terrorism if it's done by a white person. So the investigations, like I said, most of the funding goes in investigating minority populations, despite the fact that the numbers are far.
I feel like you're dodging the entire point I was trying to make, which was, is the Las Vegas...
Finally, I found it out. Hold on, I found it. I said no. I said no to that.
Okay, so the only way you're going to get the kind of numbers that you're talking about is if you're taking people like him and putting them in that category.
Why do you assume that that's what they did? And plus, that would just be one attack. Hold on, that would just be one attack. That would just be one attack.
Brennan Institute or whatever.
Hold on, that would just be one attack. This is going by a number of attacks, not necessarily deaths. And we already know that deaths caused by white extremists, by domestic terrorism, outnumber that of like a homegrown violent extremist by a lot.
No, that's not true. Maybe from 2018 to present, it might be true due to like there being a couple big attacks. But if you go from like 2016 to present, it's not true.
I go by 2014 to present.
Yeah, and if you go by 2014 to present, that's not true. You keep saying that, but it's just not true.
Domestic terrorism has caused more deaths in the U.S. How many times do I have to keep quoting the same?
Here's what we have to do. We have to actually go through every attack and see who's right and who's wrong. That's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of this.
Yes, but you're going
to do that?
Every single attack?
I will. I got time.
Based on your like random website that you found? No, I want actual people who are capable of like.
No, I have my source. You have your source. Let's compare. Let's compare lists one by one.
Do you really?
Who's wrong? Why are you afraid to do that? I'm not afraid to do that. It's really weird how you don't want to do that, buddy.
You're trying so hard, man. You're trying so hard to win this. You're not.
I won as soon as the director of the FBI said I was right.
You won as
soon as he also said that there's 4 times as many investigations.
And we already know that's where the funding goes, so of course there is.
Okay, here's a proposition for you. I have a proposition for you, because since you're obviously going to dodge on actually going through the attacks one by one, because you know how stupid you're going to look when you try to justify things as being right-wing that aren't actually right-wing.
I'm not going to justify anything that's right-wing it's not. But we also know, hold on, we also know, we both know that if a brown person committed an attack and they found ISIS propaganda in their apartments or in any place they lived, you would absolutely classify that as an ISIS terrorist attack. But if a white person were to go out and kill somebody and we found a white supremacist propaganda in their apartment, you would be like, well, that's not proof of anything. We both know you would do that.
No. It depends. Are they killing random people, or are we talking about like fucking domestic?
Here's your litmus test.
It depends on the context of who they're killing.
Here's your litmus test. The Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting, Nicholas Cruz, was he a white supremacist?
No.
That's why we can't do it. That's why we can't do this.
He's not ideologically motivated.
He had swastikas carved into his magazine when he was shooting people. If that was an Islamic person, if that was a Muslim person, and they had like some fucking Muslim symbol carved into the magazine with their gun while they were gunning down random people, you would absolutely not extend that same level of charity. That's why we're not going to do this, because you are fundamentally incapable of like treating Muslim people and white people the same.
I'm not saying that that he wasn't like fucked up, but he wasn't motivated by white nationalism to do his killing.
We both know that he had a swastika, and white supremacists or any continually was on like white supremacist forums, had a history of saying white supremacist things, had a Nazi carved into the weapon.
Instagram group chat.
Holy shit! The charity that you're extending to this white supremacist murderer is astounding to me.
I fucking like that guy. He's a piece of shit. But listen, he had what would be the closest thing to a manifesto, which was his videos that were on his cell phone, right? Are you familiar?
There is no way you would extend this level of charity to a Muslim person committing a crime. There's absolutely no reason.
Well, look. At the end of the day, I can give you Nicholas Cruz, and it's not going to change the. It's not going to change the tally. Like I'll just give you.
Wait, it literally just did change the tally.
Well, yeah, no, it change the tally, but it won't change the result. It won't change the result of who's got more attacks and more deaths on their hands.
Okay, awesome.
So I'll just give you that one because I'm not going to sit here and fucking haggle over one guy. Even though he wasn't ideologically motivated.
All right, so I sent you the Brennan Center article. Is there anything that you can see with that? Anything that you really don't like about the article I just sent you?
That article is also in the live chat, folks. I'll put it in there again, but so far I put in one for Hypocrite and then one for.
So this one's the one about the funding. This is the one about the funding. Yeah. Okay. So all right.
I want your source on when you keep saying that the white nationalists do more terror attacks. Where are you getting that from?
Okay. Let's see. I got that from the Investigative Fund of the Nation Institute. Let's see. There we go.
What?
So
this is the thing you just gave me is from June 2018.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, I just sent you another one.
You don't think that the FBI raising the terror threat of white nationalism means that they're going to put more resources?
Means that they're going to. Means that they're going to.
So I'm going to
in the future. In the future.
You're going to turn down. Right. So on the FBI website, they have a terror bulletin.
Yeah.
They post news updates about every time there's a terrorist arrest or a conviction.
And you're going to take screenshots of all the brown ones and put them on your Twitter profile.
Yeah. What I want to know is, so if you go through that list, anybody can go through that list and they'll see that it's like 5 to 1 Islamists that are arrested. That's in spite of the massive demographic differences that Bojangles thinks makes his argument look good. So what if we say, let's start from like July 1st, 2020 to January 1st, 2021. So that's in the future. That's the last 6 months of this year. When we get to the 2021, we'll look through the last 6 months of this year and see if there's more white nationalists that have been arrested or more Islamists that have been arrested, and we'll put some money on it. How does that sound?
All right, I won't put money on it. I won't put money on it, but I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Put some money on it. Put at least $10 on
Dude,
it.
I'm a grass student. Come on, I don't bet. Yeah, sure, let's do that. And then let's look at the data. Let's look to see if they're like proportionally like policing people. Let's see if the funding for finding white supremacists goes up with this new FBI directive. Let's see if the funding goes up.
Okay, I mean the problem is if there was this huge disproportionality in like ignoring white supremacists, then there would be like all these white supremacist terror attacks happening that would be massively outnumbering the amount of Islamists.
I don't view security threat just in terms of like terrorist threats. And the Department of Homeland Security doesn't either. It's also about like rhetoric and like the ethos of the nation.
No.
Hold on.
Rhetoric is not a security threat.
It can be. Wait, where do you think that like terrorist radicalization comes from? Do you think radicalization happens?
I mean propaganda. Yeah. Right.
No.
Like extremist propaganda.
Any rhetoric can like inspire people. Any rhetoric. It's not just propaganda. Propaganda isn't just when things like result in violence.
This is such a like waste of time
because the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and the U.S. intelligence community all say that online radicalization has dramatically compressed the time between radicalization and motivation to violence, and that this is increasing on the right. This is increasing in white nationalist circles. That they're having more and more influence online. That they're affecting more and more disaffected young people. And
they also say that black identity extremists are higher ranked than white nationalists.
And they can't cite any examples in that report. They can't cite any examples.
The FBI just doesn't know. The FBI is just a bunch of racists that hate black people.
Well,
that must be it. The FBI is just a bunch of racists that hate black people. That's why they rank.
Do you want to go through the history? Do you want to go through the history of the FBI on a later string? Do you want to go through the history of like law enforcement agency?
Look, I think we're ready to wrap this up because if you're not going to go through the actual attacks and you're not going to link me the source of where you're getting your numbers.
I just did. Hold on, I just did. I did a while ago.
I'm not sure I gave you the right thing, but I'm pretty sure I did.
So,
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so this is revealnews.org.
Yeah, with the investigative fund. Okay, the findings are dramatic.
I thought you said that this was from the Department of Homeland Security.
No, I said it was from the investigative fund at the Nation Institute.
The investigative fund at the Nation is... So again, we got all these fucking think tanks that are so much better at their job than the FBI.
Then the random... Wait, hold on. The FBI didn't... Wait. The FBI also agrees with me.
Where is... No, they don't. Oh my fucking God. I played you the clips and everything, dude.
Wait, they agree that they're a huge threat. And we're talking about, like, hold on. In the future, you never did answer me this question. In the future, who do you think is going to play a bigger threat? As demographics change, Islam. Really?
Yeah.
Do you think it has anything to do with it? People who are, like, pushing for change. People who are encouraging violence or suppression of, like, rights in favor of the majority aren't seeing it on the same level of threat.
I can't find the list of attacks that they're citing in the thing that you sent me. I clicked the link. It just keeps bringing me to more articles.
There's a map. There's an interactive map.
What the fuck is this? I'm supposed to go through all these, like...
You're supposed to... Oh, no! You were so ready! But now I have a map with all the, like, right-wing incidents, and we're going to go through them. You don't want to go through them one by one anymore? Because that's going to be, like, really horrible for a stream?
Oh, I see. They color-coded it.
Yeah, I don't want to go through these. Like, I don't want to, like, you can go through each one of those individually. You can make a video on it if you want. I just gave you something to debunk. I just gave you some content.
Yeah, I will. I will do that.
Okay, I'm just really interested in why you are, like, really focused on, like, especially in your, like, Twitter presence, why you only post pictures of brown people doing crime. I don't know if you, like, caught it, but one of the digs in my openings...
I'm here to debate security threats between Islam and nationalism.
Yeah,
and you're like, just gonna sit here and call me racist.
Well, you are, but that's not my argument. I'm saying that you're you can be part of that online, online radicalization that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security says is like a big threat.
Right. I'm helping people get killed, right?
Okay, you can too.
I'm done here. I'm done. I'm done, man.
You're done.
I'm done with you. You're a clown.
I'm a clown. Sure.
You want to do super chats, James? Because I'm gonna bounce.
We can run through some questions for the Q&A, folks. Thanks so much for your questions. Appreciate it. And Stupid Whore Energy, thanks for your question. First, she said, in a 2014 survey by police agencies, one of the changes from when it was done in 2007, so 7 years earlier, was for Islamic extremists, which dropped from the number 1 to number 2 position, replaced by sovereign citizens, many of whom are white supremacists. So it's a survey by police agencies.
Police agencies are more consistent in saying that the FBI specifically was very slow to address the white supremacist threat. That's why that story from the FBI, that's why Christopher Wray coming out and saying that white supremacy is now on par with things like ISIS. That's why that was such a big deal, because they were ignoring it for so long. Local law enforcement agencies and like critics in academia and stuff were saying that you were not taking this threat seriously enough. That 2009 report I mentioned said that, the election of a black president is like going to really inspire a lot of people. And we didn't see increases in hate crimes go up right after Obama was elected and in through Trump's presidency. The FBI has been slow to address this.
Gotcha. We'll give a hypocrite a chance to respond if you'd like.
Sovereign citizens and white supremacists are two different things. There's black sovereign citizen groups, like more sovereign citizen groups.
Who do you think there are more of?
What?
Who do you think there are more of?
Funny enough, if you go to the SPLC heat map, there's more black nationalist organizations, according to the SPLC, than there are white nationalist organizations.
Let's see that. I'm real interested in that. There was like 5 last time I checked. I could be wrong. I could be very wrong about that.
Gotcha. Let's see.
I gotta find the exact page. It's like, what is it? I think it's just like hate group. If you just Google like hate groups SPLC or something like that.
So we do trust the SPLC.
No, I'm just saying it's ironic that according to a left-wing anti-white organization like the SPLC, they would say that there's more
Anti-white organization.
I think I have it
If
on
you
my
go to his
phone.
Twitter, the mask will already be off, but he's letting it slip here too, just for your benefit.
I don't appreciate the personal attacks, man. I think
You called
that
me the R word earlier.
If you want to be like seriously in the debate sphere,
You called me the R word earlier, dude. Do you remember that?
Well, what retard?
Yeah,
That's a lot different than calling somebody racist, man.
sure it is. Racist is just code for anti-white. All right, what? Some more super chats. Let's go.
Yeah, I'll try to find it. Pull up the super chat.
You bet. Jeremy Pace, thanks for your question, super chat. They said, in the last century, who has more terrorist attacks in the U.S.? Islamic terrorism or white nationalists?
In the last decade?
In the last century.
Last century? Oh. Depends on whether or not you like classify the KKK as a terrorist organization, which I don't think they do, actually. KKK terrorist organization. Organization. I would actually probably guess white supremacy.
Next up, we can come back to that one as well.
Wait, do you disagree with that, Hypocrite? In the past century? I'm less concerned with things that are 100 years ago,
I've never
but
thought about going past like the 90s. You know, I don't really have an opinion on that.
yeah. If we talk about organizations, right-wing terrorist organizations are growing. Like Islamic terrorist organizations are not. Part of my issue here is that when we went into this debate, I was under the impression that you were like saying that Islam was a bigger threat because that's like the message you sent me. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe I just didn't interpret that correctly. Do you think Islam is a threat to the United States? Can you answer that directly?
I meant to say like Islamists. That's what I meant to say.
That's what you meant to say, but that's not so. Okay.
Yeah, I'm legitimately.
So then answer the question.
The wrong thing there because I'm usually pretty careful about.
Okay. So would you say that Islam is not a threat to the United States?
I understand that you're trying to bait me.
I'm not trying to bait you. I'm trying to ask you a question.
Kind of racist shit. I think that the more Muslims you have in your country, the more Muslim terrorism you have in your country. So put it that way.
Put it that way. All right. Audience can interpret that how they want.
Yeah, the audience can look at what's happening in England and France and Germany and other places and interpret it however they want.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. We can move on to the next one.
Let's go.
Just to be sure that I'm not, unless it's an inside joke, to jangle as a verb, what does that mean? Because someone in their super chat said jangles is jangling.
Jangles is jangling.
Then they said 6 to 10 goys at a time. What does that mean? I'm not hip with it. I'm not with it anymore.
It's not an inside joke. How about that?
Oh, okay. My guess is it's an insult then.
Yeah.
All right. So sorry about that.
It's okay. I had a ton of them before coming on here.
Let's see. Hold on a second. I've never seen this word. Oh, okay. Gosh, you guys. Okay. So let's do me a favor so I don't say anything inappropriate. If you can keep your super chats. I honestly don't know the current internet slang. So general
bless you. Don't learn it.
Gotcha. I think I just learned what one of those means. But General Ballsack, thanks for your super chat. They asked, Jangles, do you think that Trump's election and support directly lead to white nationalism?
I'm not sure that they lead to white nationalism. It could certainly exacerbate it, but it's more likely that a sentiment of white nationalism led to Trump. So according to a 2016 YouGov study, Trump is clearly a product of both white group solidarity and racial animus. And Trump's election was, of all the Republican candidates, Trump was white identity predicted Trump and Trump alone. Like that, white identity predicted support for Trump, and none of the in a way, none of the other candidates did. He was unquestionably, irrefutably a product of white racial solidarity and racial animus. That is uncontroversial. As to whether or not he can lead to more, I'm sure that he's going to exacerbate things. Like he said a bunch of very clearly racist things. One of the reasons he was so popular is that he disparaged, went straight for the racial disparity, but also wanted to protect things that white people like Social Security and Medicaid. He said that he was going to keep those. White people like those, but he's going to attack things that are perceived to benefit out groups other than white people. That's one of the reasons he was so popular.
Gotcha. Any, let's see. For the next super chat, I think we do have that set. We do have, while that question is being pulled up, we do have a question from the Stolen Earth, who asks, is white nationalism referring to America? Okay, America only, or any predominantly white nation? So the technical title for this debate was for America in particular, in terms of whether or not white nationalism or Islam was a greater threat. OP, thanks for your question. Prodigy Gregory, in other words, asks for Jangles. They say scientific racism is a terrible thing that needs to be combated in America immediately. But you can't throw around the word racist like it's nothing, because it's serious.
I am not throwing it away by nothing. I sincerely believe in my heart of hearts that I agree is an enormous racist. And he gets so many good arguments, which he didn't, but that's neither here nor there. I'm trying not to attack his character. I'm trying to understand where his reasoning is coming from.
Gotcha. What we can do is, let's see, if you found that source, we can give you a chance to respond. I hypocrite. Otherwise, I do have another question.
I can't find the link. I'll find it at some point and post it on Twitter or whatever.
I'm not going to fault you for that. I had a lot of trouble finding links too. I did not organize very well.
Legendary Sannon65, thanks for your question. They asked for both. Can you define, quote, white nationalism?
In the context of this discussion, it was the desire for white people to maintain social and political dominance in the United States.
Gotcha.
I would assume, and it would probably, it might be different for other countries, but generally that's it. White people don't not necessarily want to kick all non-white people out, but it's a general sense that, yeah, white people should pretty much stay, this country's for us, we should stay at the top.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that works for me.
Gotcha. So they agree on the definition. We do have some agreement. And then with that, if you guys have to split, I don't want to keep you longer than you had planned on staying, but otherwise I do have a few more questions. So
Shoot.
Rat. So 20 Faces, thanks for your question. They asked, the debate is about which of the two ideologies is a bigger threat, not just a terroristic threat. White nationalism is a euphemism for ethnic cleansing, and is there a bigger threat to that, or compared to that?
Yeah, one of the reasons that he would not let me try to make is that the worst Islam can do in the United States are terrorist attacks. That's the worst they can do. If white nationalism takes hold, and there's a lot of roots that it could do that. Politicians have exploited racial tensions and white fears of ethnic groups taking over. They've explored that throughout history, and it could happen again. That's where the threat comes from. The threat that this country can actually undergo fundamental change is far higher from white nationalism than it is from Islam.
Gotcha. And wait, if you want to respond, I hypocrite, you can.
Yeah, we're going to elect Hitler and start sending people on trains to gas chambers.
Yeah, it has to get to that level before it matters.
Just around the corner.
It has to get to that level before it matters. You're right.
Let a few hundred Muslims into the country and see what happens.
A few hundred, probably nothing.
A few hundred million.
A few hundred million. You have to take it to 100 million.
Attila the One, thanks for your question. They asked, do the debaters agree, though, that both ideologies are real problems?
Do you want to go first?
The extremism is a problem, but Islam and white nationalism of themselves are not violent. Most people who are into either of those ideologies are not violent. So no.
Gotcha.
So I kind of agree with that, but white nationalism is kind of violent, just by its nature. Like, if you want to maintain a racial hierarchy in the United States, if that's what you believe in, and you vote, you're like, by definition, you're like trying to maintain a hierarchy, and the only way to do that is through violence.
Gotcha. Thanks so much.
Not really, but okay.
Next up, thanks Attila the One for your other super chat. They said, does Jangles think Trump was elected mainly by WN?
White nationalists?
Gotcha.
No, of course not. No, of course, there are plenty of other people, probably perfectly lovely people who voted for Trump. But I'm saying that of white nationalists, one of the reasons that he got that big support is because of like nascent white fears of like losing their place. That's not, of course, that's not the only reason, but it's a big part of it. It's one of the reasons that he got elected over the other Republicans. I'll say it's probably way more prevalent there and way more important in the primary than it was in the general.
Gotcha. Let's see. I am Nomad. Thanks for your question. They have a question for I Hypocrite. They say, do you think white nationalists getting into the government and changing laws based on their ideology should be considered a threat to all?
I mean, that's like asking if democracy is a threat to all. I don't know.
It's not actually asking that. It's not actually asking that.
Gotcha.
Well, it's not a threat to white people, so it's not a threat to all, is it?
Well, the thing is, the history of white is exclusionary, so if they get their way, like, less and less people will be white. And also, like, the bigotry and white nationalism is, like, intersectional, to use a word that you probably don't like. You'll very rarely find a white nationalist who isn't also extremely homophobic, or extremely anti-Muslim, or extremely transphobic.
Yeah, it's a good thing there's no bigotry in Islam.
Yeah, of course there is, but Muslims in the United States are, like, very progressive. That's why I specifically brought that up, because I knew you would say something like that.
Gotcha.
Like, Islam, by its nature, can be nonviolent. White nationalism cannot. It's like the ideology is itself violent.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. We are going to actually run out of questions, so we do want to respect the debaters' time. We will not drag this out. We want to say thanks so much for being here, everybody. It's been a true pleasure.
Sorry, can I just give a closing statement here, just a summary of the points?
Yeah, does that sound good, Jangles? You guys each want like a few minutes?
Yeah, sure, I can do that too.
Cool.
All right, so you heard from the FBI director himself that the biggest threat to American security is homegrown violent jihadis. There's over 1,000 active investigations into that, while there's only roughly about 250 active white supremacist investigations. That's 4 times as many. From the start of 2014 to current time, there's been 20 Islamic terror attacks, which has resulted in 105 deaths, 182 injured, whereas there's been 9 right-wing terror attacks, that's including sovereign citizens and others, which has resulted in 56 deaths and 64 injured. I did not include Parkland. You can add Parkland to it, it's still less.
You could also add hate crimes into it.
Well, black people disproportionately commit hate crimes. 52% of hate crimes are committed by white people in the United States, according to the 2018.
And white people are twice as likely to be the perpetrator of a hate crime than the victim of one. Black people are twice as likely to be the victim of a hate crime than the perpetrator of one, if we're going by those same statistics.
The point is, black people commit the most hate crimes per capita. That's the point.
Against who?
I don't know.
Not white people.
Jews, maybe gays. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some whites, I'm sure.
So white supremacy isn't a problem if, like, per capita black people commit more. I got you. That was a good argument.
So the FBI also ranks black identity extremism as a higher threat than white nationalism.
And they can't name any...
One sec. Just to give I Hypocrite a chance.
Sorry, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. I apologize.
I guess what we'll do is we'll give them the few minutes uninterrupted, and then in your last few minutes, in your wrap-up, we can give you a chance to respond to these.
Yeah, that's fair. I apologize.
You know what? I'm done.
Gotcha. So... we, with that, may want to wrap up. We want to say...
Oh, can I give a little pithy closing statement?
if you want to do one about the same length, although to be fair, it's hard for me to stop Hypocrite from jumping in a few times because it.
No, I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with that. So what Hypocrite really wanted to do here was to define threat to security as like narrow as possible. He wanted to make sure it was just like terrorist attacks and violence, and it completely ignored, because he knows that if he actually goes by like ideology and like potential for threats and like the potential to grow in size, he knew that he was going to get blown out. And he kind of was anyway. So white nationalism has roots in America. It can grow just by looking to a fictionalized version of our past. In fact, white nationalism, to a certain extent, white supremacy, is still baked into our current structures, to our current laws, to our current like ethos. I didn't even get into a lot more of the studies that I had, but like we still fundamentally view white people as more American than anybody else. So white nationalism is nascent in a large part of the population. It's been getting better, but unlike what his videos say, you can stop progress. And if there are too many people like Hypocrite, like people who spread like racist propaganda on the internet, those people are going to encourage more violence, more division, more othering of people who are very much just as American as you and me, just they not happen to be white.
Gotcha. With that, we want to say, folks, first, very thankful to have our speakers here today. They're both linked in the description. So if you're like, I want to hear more of him or him, well, you have your chance. Those links are waiting for you down below. And also want to say thanks to everybody out there for your questions. It's been a very interesting one. We've never had this topic before. And so thank both of these gentlemen for coming on here, as they have come up with a truly interesting topic. So thanks again, guys, for being here.
Thank you a ton for hosting.
I will never debate this guy again who slanders me during the debate. I will never talk to you again, you fucking piece of shit. Goodbye.
Gotcha. Well, we hope you all have a great day. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. So that, well, thanks for coming by.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry that it went like that.
I know that you guys have a heated history, so I've tried to moderate fairly, and it's a challenge on my part.
No, dude, you consistently do a really, really good job moderating debates, and I really want you to know that I appreciate it. I hope that I didn't like ruin my chance to ever come on again, because I really do appreciate what you do.
No, I think that like there was kind of like the closings. It was like that's the only part where I was a little bit worried. Where I was like, maybe I could have done a better job there, just because. But we didn't actually like say that we were going to have these like strictly timed, where it's like the other person can't get like a quick interjection, and so that's why I did want to offer the same to Hypocrite. So, but no, I would be happy to have both of you guys on again. I don't know if it would be. Sounds like it probably won't be against each other, but it was really thankful that you guys chose, because I know that there are a lot of platforms that would be happy to have you guys. So we appreciate you guys coming and hang out with us. I can send you an MP4 of the file if that makes it easier, like of the debate.
Oh, that's fine.
Otherwise, yeah. So thanks.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, you have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Whew. All right. How'd we do? What do we think? Chat. How do we think it went? I'm really terrible at judging these things. I know was my mic quality like really horrible? I'm doing okay. So I'm feeling okay about that, but that's literally no judge. I felt good about debates that I didn't like how I did later, and I felt horrible about debates that I actually thought I did well, so there's no bearing on how I feel right now. All right, so I did a lot of research on. So one of the books that I really recommend to people is White Identity Politics by Ashley Jardina. The threat level of white nationalism is so like dwarfs that of like even like radical Islam, because a lot of like the history of the FBI. I really wish I got to get into this more. It's just hard to like jump in. Like the history of the FBI, especially the Department of Homeland Security, like was made after 2011. It was made in response to terrorist attacks. So of course they're going to like target like jihadist extremism a lot more than white nationalism. White nationalism, there's a problem with like cops and like law enforcement officers. Not, of course, not all, but sometimes they do enforce like white nationalist tendencies. Like law enforcement like disproportionately targeting black people. That's not an accident. Well, I mean, it might be like unintentional. It's unconscious bias, but that's still a thing. So, whew. My mic was echoing on my channel. I do not know why. There's only one. Hold on, it might be picking up from my camera too. It shouldn't be though. Hold on. Unhide all. That's why! Oh god, I'm cam link. That's why! Oh my god! Oh, I hit it. Never mind. Alright, y'all. Alright, I think that's it for me. Thank y'all for tuning in. I'm sorry that I literally just realized why my mic was echoing the entire time. So, that's a thing I could have done a lot better. I'm streaming with it. If you notice, I got a new camera. So, you know, I didn't realize that it was picking up audio as well. Yeah, turn off my camera's mic. I wish I would have figured that out, like, way sooner. I hid it in OBS, and I thought that would mute it, because, you know, of course, why would OBS let you hide something if it's picking up audio? But apparently not, so apparently just hiding it did not mute it, so, yeah, yeah. So, that was my bad the whole time. Alright, y'all. Peace.